The phone shook in Sarah's trembling hand, her voice barely a whisper as she struggled to speak. "I am so sorry. I've been preparing for weeks, but I'm in the hospital right now." On the other end, the voice was cold, mechanical, unforgiving. "We do not reschedule interviews. If you are not here on time, your application will be disqualified. Thank you." Click. The line went dead. Sarah's arm fell limply to her side like the last drop of hope had drained from her. She stared blankly at the hospital ceiling, its sterile white panels swimming in her fevered vision. Her breath caught in her chest, not from the sickness burning inside her, but from the crushing weight of another dream slipping away. She looked down at the worn leather bag by her side, the one she had packed so carefully the night before. With trembling fingers, she opened it and pulled out a folder. Inside, her resume, freshly printed and neatly placed inside a clear cover. On top of it, a sticky note in her own handwriting. "This is the start of something better." A tear slid silently down her cheek. "Please," she whispered into the stillness of the room. "Don't take this from me. My daughter, she deserves more." In the corner, a little girl sat curled up on a plastic hospital chair, legs too short to touch the ground. Lily, 4 years old, watched her mother in silence. Her honey-blonde hair framed a face far too serious for her age. She had seen too much. Too many late nights. Too many skipped meals. Too many sacrifices. She had also seen strength, the kind of strength no child should have to understand. When Sarah finally drifted into a fevered sleep, Lily climbed off the chair. Quietly, gently, she walked to the bag her mother had clutched like a lifeline. She took out the folder, the one her mom stared at every night like it held their future, and held it in her tiny hands. Then she turned. With quiet determination, Lily walked to the coat rack and pulled down her favorite pink dress, the one with the little white bows on the sleeves. She put it on, brushed her hair back with a red clip, and without a word, stepped into the hallway, folder clutched tightly to her chest. No one noticed her leave. No one stopped her. She walked past nurses, past beeping machines, past tired eyes and rushing footsteps. The hospital doors slid open, and Lily stepped into the world. The city air was cold and sharp, but she didn't flinch. She had a mission. She remembered the building from the picture on their fridge. Her mom had circled it in red. Braden and Company. Global Solutions. That's where she needed to go. That's where the future was waiting. She boarded the right bus because she remembered the number. She watched the streets through the glass like a soldier on a mission. The folder never left her grip, as if it was magic, as if it could rewrite their lives. 40 minutes later, she stood in front of a glass skyscraper that towered into the sky like a giant from a fairy tale. Letters across the front read, Braden and Company. Global Solutions. Lily took a deep breath, tightened her grip, and walked in. Inside, the lobby buzzed with the rhythm of corporate life, heels clicking, coffee brewing, elevators dinging open and closed. Behind the front desk, Charlotte, the receptionist, flipped through her morning schedule. She had just glanced at the list of interviews when she noticed a small shadow on the marble floor. Looking up, she blinked in surprise. A little girl stood there, barely tall enough to reach the counter. She wore a soft pink dress with white bows, her tiny socks bunched above her shoes. In her hands, an oversized folder. Her eyes, blue, wide, and unwavering, looked straight at Charlotte with a seriousness that didn't belong to a 4-year-old. "Sweetheart." Charlotte leaned forward, confused. "Are you lost? Are you here with someone?" Lily shook her head. "My mom's sick," she said quietly, "so I came instead." Charlotte froze. And from there, everything changed. In a world that moves too fast to notice the quiet ones, a little girl stepped in, not to beg, but to stand. Not to speak for her mother, but to honor her fight. And somewhere in that towering building full of rules and routines, a heart cracked open. Because sometimes, courage doesn't look like a suit and tie. Sometimes, it walks in wearing a pink dress with white bows, holding a folder like it's a sword. And it says, "This is the start of something better." The girl stood at the counter, the folder in her arms almost bigger than she was. But her grip was firm. Her voice steady. "I'm here for the job interview," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Charlotte, the receptionist, blinked twice, unsure if she had heard correctly. Interview? She echoed, puzzled. The little girl nodded, her eyes wide and sincere. Yes. It's for my mom. She was supposed to come. But she's really sick today. So I came instead. There was a silence, a thick, heavy pause in the middle of corporate chaos. Phones ringing, heels tapping, emails flying. But here, in this one bubble of time, everything slowed down. Around them, employees began to linger, their curiosity growing. Who was this little girl? And what was she doing here, speaking with such quiet determination? Charlotte glanced at her schedule. Your mom's name? She asked, gently. Sarah Parker, the girl replied. Sure enough, Charlotte found the name. Last interview of the morning. 9 a.m. slot. Still open. Still waiting. And your name, sweetie? Lily, she said. Charlotte hesitated. Her instincts were telling her this wasn't protocol, but her heart was saying something else. She pressed the button on her headset. Lena, can you get Mr. Braden down here, please? It's about the final interview. Just tell him it's important. 32 floors above, behind sleek glass walls and a skyline view most people only dream of, Albert Braden sat at his desk. He was young, rich, and ruthless. The kind of man who built an empire from scratch, but somewhere along the way, stopped celebrating birthdays or calling home. Interviews bored him. He only tolerated them out of necessity, until his assistant poked her head in, her voice carrying a strange amusement. Albert, she said, you might want to handle this one, personally. He raised an eyebrow. What is it? Harvard grad? Stanford whiz kid? The ex-Google engineer? She shook her head, a smirk creeping across her lips. Neither. It's unique. Just come down. With a sigh, Albert stood, adjusted the cuff of his suit jacket, and stepped into the elevator. He expected another wasted 10 minutes. What he got instead stopped him cold. When the doors slid open, there she was, a child, standing in the middle of his marble lobby like she ran the place. Pink dress. White bows. Folder in hand. She looked up at him with bright blue eyes and beamed. Are you the boss? Albert blinked, confused. Yes, I am. She marched forward with no hesitation. I brought my mom's papers, she said, holding out the folder. She's really smart, but she's sick. I think she deserves this job. Albert reached out and took the folder, its corner slightly bent, a tiny fingerprint smudge on the cover. He looked around, every employee frozen, every conversation paused. Then something strange happened, something no one had seen in years. He smiled. Not a smirk, not a fake polite twitch. A real, honest, caught-off-guard smile. He turned to Charlotte. Clear my schedule for the next 15 minutes. Sir, she blinked. I'm conducting an interview, he said. Then he turned to Lily. Shall we? Inside the glass-walled conference room, he pulled out a chair, massive compared to her tiny frame. But she climbed up like she'd done it before. Confident. Composed. She placed the folder carefully on the table. Albert sat across from her and opened it, glancing at the resume as he spoke. So, Lily, he asked, adjusting his tone, why does your mom want to work here? Lily folded her small hands on the edge of the table. She works really, really hard, she began. She never buys anything for herself. She says she wants a job that uses her brain, not just her hands. Albert's face didn't move, but his eyes sharpened. She went to college, but she had to stop, because of me, Lily added quietly. But she's smart. And kind. She always helps people. Albert looked back down at the resume, this time, really reading it. Her education. Skills. Letters of recommendation. A mind that had been gathering dust in diner shifts and double shifts. He looked back up. And why did you come today, Lily? The girl looked him straight in the eye. Because she didn't give up on me, she said. So I couldn't give up on her. Lily smiled, shy but proud. Because Mama was really sad when she hung up the phone, she said softly. She told me she just wanted to give me a better life. So, I came to help. Albert leaned back in his chair. To anyone else, he looked the same, polished, unreadable. But if you knew him, really knew him, you'd notice the change. The tension leaving his jaw, the softness creeping into his gaze. Something inside him shifted. A small, real smile touched his lips. "Well then," he said gently, closing the folder with care, "let's begin the interview." He sat across from her, hands now resting calmly on the closed folder containing Sarah Parker's resume. But he wasn't reading it anymore. His focus was on the little girl sitting across from him, feet dangling, posture proud, eyes as steady as any executive he'd ever faced. "So, Lily," he said, "can you tell me what your mom is like?" Lily nodded, folding her small hands in her lap. She blinked slowly, thinking carefully. "Mama works all day," she began. "All the time?" Albert asked, leaning in slightly. She nodded again. "She cleans houses. Sometimes she's a waitress. And sometimes she delivers food. She never gets to sit down much." Albert frowned a little, nodding silently. "She never buys anything for herself," Lily continued. "Even when her shoes have holes. She says, 'No, these are still good.' Then she buys me new ones instead." Albert's eyes drifted to Lily's sneakers, bright white with little glittery stars. "Brand new. Of course. She always puts me first," Lily added. Her voice was softer now. "Even when she's tired. Even when no one notices." The room was still. The thick windows blocked out the city noise. And in that silence, something settled deep in Albert's chest. Something he hadn't felt in years. "Did your mom go to college?" he asked. Lily brightened a little. "She did. She said she loved learning. But she didn't get to finish. Because she had me." Albert's breath caught in his throat. Lily didn't flinch or look down. She was steady, honest. "She told me once," Lily continued, "that she doesn't regret it. She said, 'You are my favorite reason to stop anything.'" That sentence, so simple, so powerful, landed like a stone in Albert's gut. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't manipulated. It was real. In that moment, he could see it clearly. A young woman, full of potential, walking away from it all because she chose love over ambition. And not just walking away, but building something new from the ground up. Alone. No shortcuts. No excuses. He closed the folder. "And what do you want for your mom, Lily?" he asked, his voice softer now. Lower. Lily tilted her head and thought for a moment. "I want her to be happy," she said. "She's always tired. But she smiles when I draw her pictures. Or when we watch cartoons." She paused. "She just needs a break, I think." And then she looked up at him, eyes wide, deep and ocean blue. "Mama doesn't need a lot of money," she said seriously. "She just wants a job that lets her buy ice cream every weekend." Albert froze. That sentence hit him harder than any pitch he'd heard in his entire career. Ice cream. Every Saturday. That's all she wanted. Not a bonus. Not a car. Not vacations or raises or stock options. Just a moment of normalcy. A sweet, quiet reward for surviving the week. "She told me once," Lily whispered, "that she'd be the happiest woman in the world if she could just give me that. Ice cream. Every Saturday." Albert swallowed hard. For the first time in years, he forgot how to breathe. The silence between them was thick again. Not awkward, but sacred. A kind of stillness that demanded respect. Lily shifted in her chair, swinging her legs. Albert leaned forward. He placed the folder gently on the table. "Lily," he said carefully, "I've interviewed a lot of people in this room." She looked up at him, curious. "But no one," he continued, "has ever said something that mattered quite like that." Lily smiled, not quite understanding the weight of what she'd said, but sensing she had done something right. Albert leaned back. His next words were slow, measured, real. "I think your mother might be exactly the kind of person we need." Lily's eyes widened. "Really?" Albert nodded slowly. "Really?" he said. Then, before he could stop himself, he added, "And I happen to know a place that has very good ice cream." Lily's face lit up instantly. "Mama would like that." He smiled wider now, a rare, genuine smile. Not one of power or charm, but something real. For a moment, He allowed himself to picture it. Sarah sitting across from him, not exhausted and begging for a break, but confident, seen, respected. Lily laughing beside her. A life not built on survival, but finally, stability. Albert stood and walked to the door. "Charlotte," he called to his assistant, his voice calm but firm. "I need you to find out which hospital Sarah Parker was admitted to yesterday." Charlotte blinked, surprised. "Of course. Anything else?" "Yes," he said. "Send flowers. And something for a little girl." He paused, glanced back at Lily, who was now standing proudly beside her chair, folder in hand again. "Also, ask if she'd be available for a formal interview once she's well enough." Charlotte's eyebrows lifted, but she nodded. "Absolutely." Albert turned to Lily. "Thank you for coming today," he said sincerely. "You did something very brave." Lily shrugged with a grin. "Mama says I'm brave all the time." Albert chuckled softly, holding the door open. "She's right." Lily skipped out, and the door closed gently behind her. Inside, Albert stood alone. The resume folder still sat untouched on the desk, but now, something about it felt heavier. More personal. More real. He walked back to his seat slowly and opened the folder again, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity. At the top, Sarah Parker. Her name, typed neatly. Her resume was clean, structured, and quietly impressive. Academic achievement stood out first: full scholarship, honors in her first year, president of the student marketing club, peer mentor, stellar GPA. Then, a gap. No degree. No graduation date. No fancy internships. Just silence. And then, a different story emerged. A string of part-time jobs: waitress, housekeeper, night janitor, food delivery driver. Jobs that didn't earn applause, but held up a life. Jobs that fed a child, paid for shoes, covered daycare, and sometimes didn't cover anything at all. Albert read every line. Not quickly. Not analytically. Slowly. Thoughtfully. Humanly. Then, just at the bottom, beneath the last entry, his eyes caught something different. A small note. Handwritten. Faint ink. Slightly tilted. "I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm only asking for a real chance." He stared at it. That one line hit harder than any pitch deck or polished cover letter he'd ever seen. He leaned back in his chair, eyes on the skyline, but his thoughts were with her. This wasn't just another name in a database. This was someone who had walked through fire and never stopped walking. Not because she wanted a medal, but because she had a daughter who believed in her. It wasn't about charity. It was about recognizing strength in the quietest places. He reached for the intercom. "Charlotte." "Yes, sir." "I need a delivery sent to City General Hospital." A pause. "What would you like to send?" Albert stood, walked to the far side of his office. On a high shelf, tucked behind some dusty awards, was a small box, wrapped in cream paper with a satin ribbon. A baby gift. One he never gave. He picked it up gently. "And have the florist downstairs put together something simple. Not corporate. Just kind." Charlotte's voice softened. "Who should we address it to?" He paused, then said, "Sarah Parker." "And the message?" Albert looked back at the resume, then at the little handwritten note. His jaw tightened slightly as his voice dropped to a whisper. "To the strongest woman I have yet to meet." At City General Hospital, morning sunlight slipped through the blinds, casting a soft glow over Sarah's face. Her head throbbed. Her body ached. But something was different. The room felt still, peaceful, almost like a secret was waiting. She turned her head and blinked. On the bedside table sat a small bouquet of pastel wildflowers. Delicate, thoughtful, and next to it, a neatly wrapped box with a note resting gently against it. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the card. She read the words once, then again. Her breath caught in her chest. "To the strongest woman I have yet to meet." Her eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. She read the card again. "To the strongest woman I have yet to meet." Sarah's heart skipped. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the small cream-colored box beside the flowers. Inside was a small pack of chocolate milk and a handwritten card. Not expensive, not dramatic, but impossibly thoughtful. Then it hit her. Lily. Her stomach twisted. A sharp edge of panic pushed through the fog of her recovery. How had she gotten there? What had she said? Sarah grabbed her phone with shaking hands, her fingers clumsy from lingering fever. She scrolled, heart pounding, until she found the number printed on the company brochure she'd stuffed into her bag days ago. She pressed call. The line rang. Once. Twice. Then a calm, professional voice answered. Braden and Company, this is Charlotte speaking. Hi, hello. Sarah stammered, her voice still weak. This is Sarah Parker. I think there's been a misunderstanding. My daughter, she's only 4, she may have come to your office yesterday with my resume. I'm so sorry. She didn't mean any harm, she just... Charlotte's gentle chuckle stopped her mid-spiral. Miss Parker, she said kindly, no need to apologize. In fact, your daughter may be the bravest person we've ever seen walk into this building. Sarah froze. Your CEO was very impressed, Charlotte added warmly. Sarah blinked. Your CEO? Yes, Mr. Braden. He asked if you might be available today, for a formal interview. If you're feeling better. Sarah's breath caught. Are you sure? We're very sure. That afternoon, Sarah stepped out of a cab in front of Braden and Company's gleaming tower. It looked even more intimidating in daylight. She held her bag close to her chest, legs still a little shaky from the fever, and cheeks flushed with nerves. She wore the cleanest outfit she had, a navy blouse and a plain skirt. Her blonde hair was pulled back neatly, though not stylishly. Her shoes were scuffed. She knew that. But today wasn't about looking perfect. It was about showing up. Inside, the receptionist greeted her like an old friend. Miss Parker. Welcome back, Charlotte said, emerging from a hallway. He's expecting you. Sarah followed her through sleek corridors, every footstep echoing like a heartbeat. The elevator ride was silent, but inside her, memories and fears buzzed like static. She had waited years for an opportunity like this, and never thought it would come like this. On the top floor, Charlotte smiled and gestured toward a glass door. He's in there. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped inside. The office was open, modern, filled with light. Standing by the window, reviewing a folder, was a tall man with sharp eyes and calm energy. He looked up. Albert Braden. And he smiled, a real smile. Miss Parker, he said warmly, walking toward her. I'm glad you're feeling better. Sarah swallowed. Her voice felt too small in the wide space. Thank you. I'm so sorry about my daughter. Albert raised a hand gently. There's nothing to apologize for, he said. She gave one of the most compelling presentations I've ever seen. Sarah blinked. He gestured toward the chair in front of his desk. Please. She sat down carefully, legs crossed at the ankle, her bag resting on her lap like a shield. Albert sat as well and tapped the folder on his desk. I've read thousands of resumes, he said, but yours came with the most powerful letter of recommendation I've ever received. Sarah's lips parted. Her heart thudded. He smiled again, this time, gently. She believes in you more than most people believe in anything. Sarah lowered her gaze, trying to breathe through the heat rising to her face. She's my whole world. I can tell, Albert said. Which is why I'd like to see what you can do here. Her head lifted. Hope flickered in her eyes like a sunrise. Her first day at Braden and Company felt like stepping into a movie she'd once watched through a window. Glass walls. The click of polished heels. The quiet rhythm of people who knew their place. She had expected, maybe an unpaid internship. A few hours of filing. Instead, Albert had offered her a real position. Junior project assistant. Not charity. Not a favor. A real job. A real desk. Because someone had finally looked past the paper resume and seen the person behind it. She could feel the stares. The office was sleek and professional. Everyone looked sharp, polished, confident. And then there was Sarah, modest blouse, slightly worn shoes, a second-hand laptop bag clutched close like armor. She looked different. She sounded different. And everyone knew. She was the one with the kid. Some whispered she got the job out of pity. Others didn't whisper at all. They just ignored her. But Sarah didn't flinch. She came early, stayed late, took notes, asked questions, made mistakes, owned them, fixed them, never made the same one twice. She watched everything. How the senior assistants organized files, how they prepped for client calls, how they communicated in short, strategic bursts. She studied every company report like it was a survival manual. And little by little, something changed. Someone asked her to double-check a slide deck. Another asked her to help with a chaotic calendar. Then one day, someone said, "Thank you." And meant it. But one person had never doubted her. Albert Braden. He didn't hover, didn't micromanage. But he watched. When Sarah's name came up in meetings, he leaned in. What did she contribute? How was her input received? He asked because he already knew. He noticed everything. Like the day Lily had a fever and Sarah called in, voice cracking with guilt. Albert messaged her privately. Family comes first. Take what you need. Or the afternoon he saw her skipping lunch and, without comment, his assistant appeared with an extra sandwich in the break room. Or how she was always seated at the main table during project reviews, not in the back, not on the sidelines. He never said it aloud. But Sarah knew. And for the first time in years, she began to believe she belonged. It was nearly 9 p.m. Most of the office was dark. The city lights outside flickered like fireflies against glass. But Sarah was still there, fine-tuning a presentation for a major client. Her fingers ached. Her eyes were heavy. But beneath the exhaustion, she felt something unfamiliar. Fulfillment. She didn't notice Albert walk in until he spoke. You work harder than people who've been here 10 years. She looked up, startled, then smiled softly. Guess I've got 10 years to catch up on. He chuckled and gestured to the chair beside her desk. May I? She nodded. For a moment, they just sat today. Two people surrounded by quiet and ambition. Then Sarah spoke, voice low. I never thought I'd end up in a place like this. Albert looked over. Curious. Why not? She hesitated. I was in college. Marketing major. I loved it. I had internships lined up. Plans. She paused. Then I met someone. Thought he was it. Got pregnant during my first year. Albert's expression didn't shift, but his gaze softened. I thought maybe we'd figure it out together. But he left. Vanished. She looked down at her hands. My parents said I embarrassed them. That I ruined my future. Told me to either give up the baby, or leave. She gave a tight smile. I left. Silence. I chose Lily, she said simply. And I lost everything else, my degree, my apartment, the future I thought was mine. Albert leaned forward and placed a steady hand over hers. She flinched slightly, bracing for pity. But instead, his voice was calm. I was left, too. She looked up. I was 10. My parents died in a car accident. No siblings. No relatives who wanted me. I bounced through homes. Learned to survive. He sat back. I built this company because I wanted control. But I never had what you have. She tilted her head. What's that? He smiled softly. Courage. You chose love, Sarah. Even when it cost you everything. Tears welled in her eyes. I used to think I was weak. Albert shook his head. You are anything but. And in that quiet, something shifted. Not romance. Not yet. Just a mutual knowing. A soft unspoken promise between two people who'd lived too much life too soon, and had finally met someone who understood the weight of survival. The weeks passed. Sarah blossomed. Her ideas were sharp. Her instincts, reliable. Co-workers who once whispered now came to her for advice. She wasn't just the assistant. She was the one who got it done. Her name carried weight, and Albert no longer needed to check in. Her work spoke for itself. But he still found reasons to swing by. Small questions. Quick updates. Excuses. Really. And when he passed her desk, his gaze lingered, just a little longer than it should. But it wasn't just Sarah he'd grown attached to. It was Lily. Every Friday, Like clockwork, Lily arrived after preschool. She skipped down the hallway like it was hers, arms full of coloring books, barrette bouncing in her curls. She waited on the couch in Albert's office, her spot, shoes swinging, announcing, "Boss man, I'm here." If he was still on a call, he'd cancel meetings just to take her for milkshakes. They had rituals now. She saved him the last cookie from the cafeteria. He called her the real CEO. She sat on his shoulders at company picnics. And Sarah watched. Every tiny moment stitched into her heart like gold thread, making her chest ache with warmth and fear. Because this was real. And that meant it could be taken away. Sarah had loved quietly for so long, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. For years, her dreams had lived buried under grocery lists, doctor's visits, and part-time jobs. She didn't complain. She couldn't. There was no one to listen. But now, love stared her in the face every day. And it was smiling, wearing a suit, carrying her daughter on its shoulders. Albert Braden. The man who'd once hired her when no one else would. The man who had quietly, slowly, become something much more. One evening, long after the office had emptied, the three of them sat in Albert's corner office. Lily was curled up in the corner with a juice box, humming as she colored in a sketchpad. Sarah and Albert were reviewing a project recap, laughter flowing easily between them, the kind of laughter that lives between people who've seen each other's scars, and stayed anyway. When they finished, Sarah leaned back and stretched. "She's tired," she said softly, glancing at Lily. Albert smiled, eyes warm. "We can carry her down together." Sarah stood. "Let me grab her bag." But she stopped, because Lily had looked up from her coloring and asked, in the small, curious voice of a child who sees the world with perfect clarity, "Mommy, can I call Uncle Albert, Daddy?" The room fell completely still. Albert froze. Sarah stood motionless, the bag slipping in her hand. Lily blinked, innocent. "Because he always picks me up and brings me ice cream. And he reads to me like you do. And he makes you smile." Sarah's eyes filled instantly, not out of shock, but recognition. Because deep down, she had already known. She had known from the way Albert looked at Lily, like she was the most important person in the room. From how he spoke to Sarah, like she belonged there. From the quiet safety in the air when all three were together. This man, who had built his life behind steel walls, had let them in. And somewhere between rushed emails, bedtime stories, and Friday milkshakes, they had built something no one expected. A family. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, voice trembling. "You can call him whatever feels right to you, baby." Then she turned to Albert, afraid of what she might find in his eyes. But he was already moving. He crouched down beside them, gaze steady and full of something deeper than words. Looking first at Lily, then at Sarah. "I'd be honored," he said. And that's when she broke. Not from fear, not even relief, but from something stronger. Belonging. A year later, no one remembered the shy, overwhelmed woman who'd once walked into Braden and Company clutching her resume like it was her last chance. Now they knew Sarah Parker, project team lead. Poised. Confident. Brilliant. Her name was attached to wins. Her opinion was sought in meetings. She trained junior staff, led key accounts, and walked through the office with the quiet presence of someone who had earned every inch of respect. Albert was never far. At first, their relationship was private, not out of shame, but out of respect. For the company. For their roles. For each other. But love like that doesn't stay hidden. He brought Lily her favorite croissants on Monday mornings. Sarah was the only one who could interrupt his meetings without knocking. And when their eyes met across the conference table, no one needed context. It was never gossip. It was admiration. Sarah wasn't loved just for who she was with Albert. She was admired for who she had always been. Resilient. Steady. Unshakably kind. She remembered birthdays, supported teammates through late nights, and never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. Lily had become part of the company's story, too. She had her own seat in the break room, a drawer for crayons in the supply cabinet, and a fan club made up of interns and executives. She once opened a quarterly meeting by climbing onto the stage and announcing, "Good morning, team." No one forgot it. To the office, She was the little CEO. To Albert, she was simply his daughter. On the night of the annual Christmas gala, the ballroom shimmered. Soft gold lights glowed across velvet-draped tables. Jazz music floated through the air. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed. Sarah stood near the tree, a deep blue gown hugging her frame, blonde hair shining in the light. She looked calm, graceful, unshakably grounded. Nearby, Lily twirled in a white dress, silver shoes flashing beneath her as she danced through a group of amused executives. Albert watched them both from across the room. Black tie, drink in hand. But his eyes weren't on the champagne or the crowd. They were on them. He had once stayed on the edges of these kinds of events, detached, controlled. But tonight? He stayed close. Not for show. For love. The music softened. A gentle tap on a glass silenced the room. Albert stepped forward toward the mic. I know this is usually when we talk about numbers, he began, projections, growth, strategy. He glanced toward Sarah. But tonight, I want to talk about something that changed my life. He turned slightly. Lily was now seated at a nearby table, happily munching 2 cookies with frosting all over her cheeks. A year ago, he continued, I received the most unusual job application of my career. Laughter rippled through the crowd. It was hand-delivered by someone about 3 feet tall, in a pink dress, holding a resume twice her size. More laughter. Sarah covered her face, already crying. Albert smiled, but his voice grew steadier, more vulnerable. That little girl walked into my office with no fear, looked me straight in the eye, and in that moment, she didn't just bring a resume. He looked directly at Lily, then at Sarah. She brought hope, courage, and the beginning of something I never knew I needed. He stepped down from the mic, moving toward them. To both of you, he said, voice barely above a whisper, thank you. For showing up. For holding on. And for walking into my life exactly when I needed you. Then he bent down, face level with Lily. And thank you, boss, for marching into my office in that pink dress, holding that giant resume. Applause erupted. People stood. Glasses clinked. Someone wiped their eyes. And beneath the twinkling lights of the ballroom, they stood not as CEO, employee, and child, but as something far more lasting. A family. A family built on bravery, chance, and one little girl who refused to be underestimated. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive the way we imagine. Sometimes, it walks through the front doors of an office building, 3 feet tall, armed with nothing but a coloring book and a dream. Because family isn't always about where you come from. Sometimes, it's about who chooses to stay when things get hard. And sometimes, the greatest love story begins not with a kiss, but with the words, "Can I call him Daddy?" If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Because somewhere out there, another little girl is holding a resume, and another heart is waiting to be changed.